The late afternoon sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows on the executive floor of Apex Enterprises. Richard Calloway's corner office, with its sweeping view of the downtown skyline, felt unusually confined as he leaned over his laptop, scanning through merger reports. The glow of the screen reflected off his rectangular glasses, accentuating the faint lines etched by 15 years of navigating corporate battles. A notification flashed on the screen. Board meeting rescheduled next week. Richard's hand paused over the mouse, a subtle tremor betraying his otherwise calm demeanor. As the executive vice president of operations, he had been building toward this moment his entire career. Walter Finch's retirement announcement last month had set the wheels in motion, and the upcoming vote was expected to be a mere formality. The faint click of heels on marble caught his attention. Lauren Grant appeared at the door, her charcoal blazer immaculate, a thick folder held tightly in her arms. After 9 years as his assistant, Lauren had developed an uncanny ability to gauge his mood. The latest marketing numbers just came in, she said, placing the folder on his polished desk. She hesitated, fingers brushing her silver necklace. Sir, about the board meeting. Being moved up, Richard reclined in his chair, his gaze sharpening. What are you not telling me, Lauren? She glanced over her shoulder before quietly closing the office door. There's talk. Nathan Reynolds has been having private discussions with the board. She hesitated again. I saw Emma Carlson and Robert James having dinner with him at Verve last night. The name sent a chill down Richard's spine. Nathan Reynolds, the rising star in marketing with his flawless suits and Stanford MBA, had been making waves since joining the company a year and a half ago. Nathan's ambitious, Richard replied, keeping his tone even. It's only natural he'd network with the board. Lauren lowered her voice further. It's not just networking, sir. He's positioning himself for your role. Before Richard could answer, a familiar figure strode past his office. Melissa Calloway, his wife of 9 years and the director of marketing, walked by without a glance. Her heels tapped sharply against the floor, her tailored suit accentuating her poised frame, drawing the eyes of a junior associate passing by. Mrs. Calloway seems distant lately, Lauren commented cautiously. Richard's jaw tightened. That'll be all, Lauren. Thank you. Alone, he opened the bottom drawer of his desk, retrieving a framed ultrasound image. The grainy photo was dated a year ago. Their baby, their hope, lost in the 3rd trimester. Melissa had withdrawn after that, throwing herself into her work, leaving their home cold and filled with strange silences. His phone vibrated, a text from Melissa. Working late. Don't wait up. The drive home felt interminable. The evening sky was painted with hues of orange and violet, but Richard barely noticed, his thoughts looping over every interaction with Nathan Reynolds. The interruptions in meetings, the challenges to his ideas, and the way Nathan positioned himself as the modern, innovative voice against Richard's seasoned strategies. The house was dark when he arrived, save for the soft glow from their bedroom window. As he climbed the stairs, the faint sound of drawers opening and closing echoed through the hallway. He found Melissa in their walk-in closet, meticulously packing items into the leather weekend bag he'd given her for their last anniversary. Going somewhere? Richard asked, leaning casually against the doorframe. Melissa didn't turn, continuing to fold a silk blouse with deliberate precision. Out of town for the weekend? Business trip, he pressed. No, she finally replied, facing him, with an expression that lacked the warmth he once cherished. A personal trip. With Nathan Reynolds. The name lingered in the air like a cloud. Melissa's laugh was sharp and dismissive. You've always been good at connecting dots, Richard. That's what made you successful at work. But you can't control who I spend my time with anymore. The words landed like punches, but Richard kept his composure. How long? He asked. Does it matter? She shot back, zipping the bag shut with finality. This marriage has been paper for years. Her voice faltered slightly as her hand grazed her stomach before she turned away. Nathan's taking me to his beach house. We'll be back Sunday night. The doorbell chimed downstairs, its cheerful tone clashing with the moment. Melissa brushed past him, bag in hand. Richard followed her, watching as she opened the door to Nathan Reynolds. Nathan leaned against the doorframe with calculated ease, his tailored suit immaculate and his confident smirk unmistakable. Richard, Nathan said smoothly, his tone almost mocking. Hope you don't mind me borrowing Melissa for the weekend. His arm slid around Melissa's waist, his demeanor oozing arrogance. We've got some plans, relaxation, inspiration, you know how it is. Richard watched them walk to Nathan's sleek Tesla Model S, noting how Melissa didn't glance back. The car's soft hum faded into the night, leaving Richard standing alone in the doorway of his silent home. In his study, he poured himself a glass of bourbon, but left it untouched. Instead, he opened his laptop and immersed himself in work, hours slipping by until dawn began to tint the sky with gray. Saturday morning arrived with the gentle rhythm of rain against the windows. Richard had just finished his third coffee when the doorbell rang. Lauren Grant stood on his porch, holding a waterproof portfolio and wearing an expression of urgency. "Sir, I apologize for coming here, but this couldn't wait until Monday." She followed him into his home office, her sensible shoes leaving faint wet marks on the hardwood floor. "I've been gathering this for months," she began, opening the portfolio and spreading a collection of documents across his desk. Emails, surveillance photos, meeting records, and financial reports formed a damning trail of betrayal. "Nathan's been planning this since he joined the company," Lauren explained, pointing to key dates on the documents. "He and Mrs. Calloway have been working together to sabotage your position. Look at these project reports. They've been altering data, taking credit for your strategies, and positioning Nathan as the next CEO." Richard scanned an incriminating email chain between Nathan and Emma Carlson, the youngest board member. "They've been thorough," he muttered. "But not thorough enough," Lauren countered, placing a final document in front of him. A dated internal memo that made Richard's eyes narrow. "They made one critical mistake, sir, and I think it's time we use it." The rain continued outside, but the atmosphere in Richard's office shifted. Defeat gave way to determination. Shock turned into strategy. Holding a photo of Nathan and Melissa entering a private dining room at Verve, Richard's jaw tightened. "Lauren, get Heidi Bishop from Internal Audit on the phone. I want to meet her first thing Monday. And find Marco Langston in legal." Lauren's efficient smile held a trace of satisfaction. "Already done, sir. They'll meet you at 7 a.m. at Belmont." Away from prying eyes, as Lauren gathered the documents, Richard moved to his window, watching raindrops trace paths down the glass. In their distorted reflections, he saw the past year unfold. Melissa's gradual detachment, Nathan's calculated maneuvers, and the subtle shifts in board alliances. He'd been too wrapped in personal grief to recognize the professional storm brewing around him. "Sir?" Lauren paused at the doorway. "There's something else you should know. Nathan's beach house? It's not just a private residence. It's listed as a company property for client meetings. He's been writing off personal trips as business expenses for months." Richard nodded slowly, his reflection in the glass revealing the faintest hint of a smile. "Thank you, Lauren, for everything." "Of course, sir." She hesitated before adding. They thought they were clever, playing both personal and professional angles. But they forgot something important. "What's that?" Richard asked. "In chess, the queen might be powerful, but it's often the pawns that decide the game." After she left, Richard returned to his desk and opened his private email. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he composed messages to key board members. Nathan and Melissa's betrayal might have been methodical, but they'd overlooked a critical rule of corporate strategy. Never underestimate a man with nothing to lose. Through the weekend, Richard meticulously crafted his counterattack. Each document Lauren had provided exposed deeper layers of deceit, while also revealing opportunities. Nathan's intricate plan had one glaring flaw. He had underestimated Richard's resolve. Sunday evening brought the faint hum of a Tesla pulling into the driveway. Richard watched from his study window as Nathan dropped Melissa off. She looked tanned, her weekend bag slung over her shoulder, and entered the house without hesitation. The sound of her heels echoed through the quiet halls. "Had a good weekend?" Richard called out, not moving from his desk. Melissa appeared at the study doorway, her expression guarded. "Don't start, Richard. We both know this marriage has been over since the miscarriage. I'm just finally doing something about it. By sleeping with the man trying to take my job?" Richard's tone was calm. "Nathan has vision, she replied defensively. He sees opportunities you're too conservative to pursue. The board sees it too. Next week's vote is just a formality. Richard turned to face her fully, noting the flicker of hesitation in her eyes as she unconsciously stepped back. You're probably right about the marriage being over. But Melissa? He held her gaze. You might want to review company policies on relationships between directors and potential CEOs. A shadow of uncertainty crossed her face. Are you threatening me? Not at all, he replied evenly. Just professional advice between colleagues. You might want to prepare for tomorrow's emergency board meeting. I hear it's going to be enlightening. Her heels clicked sharply as she left the room, her bag brushing the doorframe in her haste. Upstairs, doors slammed as she moved through their bedroom. Richard remained at his desk, calmly finalizing his presentation for the next day. His phone buzzed with a message from Lauren. Everything's in place for tomorrow. Heidi and Marco are ready. He replied with a simple thank you before shutting down his laptop. Tomorrow would be a turning point, not just for him and Melissa, but for the entire company. Nathan had played a clever game, blending personal betrayal with professional sabotage, but he'd underestimated one key factor. Richard wasn't bound by the old rules anymore. As night enveloped the house, Richard sat in the quiet of his study, listening to the sounds of Melissa moving upstairs. Every drawer opening, hanger sliding, and shoe dropping was another fragment of their shared life being packed away. But unlike before, these sounds no longer pained him. Instead, they steeled his resolve. He pulled out his phone and drafted one last email to Walter Finch, the CEO. Walter, regarding tomorrow's emergency board meeting, I have critical concerns about recent activities in marketing. I've prepared an in-depth report. Legal's presence is advised. Walter's reply came swiftly. Understood. I'll review it tonight. Understood. I've had my own concerns. See you at 9 a.m. sharp. Upstairs, Melissa's footsteps had gone quiet. Through the study window, Richard could see her silhouette in their bedroom, phone pressed to her ear. No doubt warning Nathan about tomorrow's meeting. Let them prepare, he thought. Some betrayals couldn't be defended against. He opened his desk drawer one last time, pulling out the ultrasound photo that symbolized the beginning of their end. Tomorrow would bring a different kind of loss for Melissa, one she had orchestrated herself. The thought brought him no satisfaction, only a grim sense of resolve. The night stretched ahead, promising little sleep but offering plenty of time to ensure every detail was in place. In 12 hours, the carefully constructed world Nathan and Melissa had built would start to collapse. And from its ruins, Richard would create something stronger, something enduring. Outside, the city lights sparkled like distant stars, indifferent to the human drama unfolding below. Somewhere among those lights, Nathan Reynolds was likely celebrating what he believed to be his imminent triumph. By this time tomorrow, he'd learn a hard lesson about the cost of betrayal. Richard closed the drawer, sealing the ultrasound photo away for the final time. Tomorrow wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. The kind of justice served in boardrooms and financial statements, through meticulous planning and perfect timing. The game was about to change, and only one player knew all the rules. Morning fog clung to the windows of Belmont Cafe, turning the bustling street outside into a hazy blur. Richard Calloway arrived promptly at 7 a.m., choosing a secluded corner booth that offered a clear view of both entrances. The cafe's early morning calm matched his purpose, far removed from Apex Enterprises' politics and surveillance. Heidi Bishop, head of internal audit, was already there, her laptop open and a neat stack of folders beside it. Her rectangular glasses glinted in the warm light as she glanced up from her screen. I've been expecting this meeting for weeks. Have you? Richard asked, settling into the booth and nodding at the waitress who brought his usual black coffee. Nathan Reynolds' numbers. Never added up, Heidi said, tapping a folder with her fingers. But I needed someone in leadership to take notice before I could initiate a formal audit. The bell above the door chimed as Marco Langston entered, shaking raindrops from his umbrella. The company's lead counsel, dressed impeccably in a tailored pinstripe suit, slid into the booth beside Heidi, his demeanor serious. I hope you understand the gravity of this, Marco said, accepting a coffee from the waitress. Taking on Nathan Reynolds means confronting half the board. He's charmed them with his vision for the company. Show me everything, Richard replied, pulling out his laptop. Heidi opened her first folder, spreading a series of reports and documents across the table. I started noticing anomalies in marketing's ROI figures 3 months ago. Look at these quarterly reports, she said, pointing to highlighted sections. They're claiming a 300% return on the Asia-Pacific expansion, but cross-referencing with actual market data shows they're double-counting results. Richard scanned the numbers and hiding failures under unrelated cost centers. Exactly, Heidi confirmed, pulling up a spreadsheet on her laptop. Every major marketing initiative under Nathan's leadership follows the same pattern. He takes credit for organic growth, inflates success metrics, and buries failures in other departments. Marco leaned forward, his coffee untouched. It gets worse. That beach house where Nathan took Melissa this weekend. He held up his phone, showing a property record. It's registered as a company asset, supposedly for client meetings and corporate retreats. And, Richard prompted, the only clients who've stayed there are Nathan's personal guests, Marco explained. He's been expensing everything, utilities, maintenance, even the wine cellar, as business costs. I've got records of at least 6 women he entertained there, all company employees. The weight of the revelation settled over the table. Heidi adjusted her glasses, a telltale sign she had more to add. There's one more thing, she said, pulling out another file. Nathan's been systematically taking credit for your operational improvements. Remember the supply chain optimization project last quarter? The one that saved $12 million? Richard's voice was steady, but edged with tension. Marketing's reports claim the savings came from their innovative vendor strategies. But I have the original project files, your signature, your team's analysis, everything. Marco's phone buzzed, drawing his attention. He glanced at it and raised an eyebrow. Walter Finch just confirmed tomorrow's emergency board meeting. 9 a.m. Perfect timing, Richard said, his thoughts already racing through the next steps. Heidi, I need every irregularity documented, every false claim traced back to its origin. Marco, gather everything on the beach house, property records, expense reports, even security footage if available. Already done, Heidi said, patting the stack of folders beside her. I've been compiling this case since Nathan started pushing those inflated ROI figures. The only thing I needed was executive backing to proceed. And now you have it. Richard took a sip of his coffee, its bitterness mirroring his mood. What about Bradley Fletcher? Will the CFO support these findings? Bradley's been questioning marketing's numbers for months, Marco confirmed. He'll corroborate everything once it's formally presented. And there's more. Kirsten Pierce from HR contacted me last week. Apparently, Melissa isn't Nathan's first association. The cafe had begun filling with morning commuters, their voices creating a murmur of white noise. Richard glanced at a couple seated at the counter, observing how the woman leaned toward her partner with effortless trust. He forced his thoughts away from similar memories with Melissa. Nathan's getting careless, Heidi remarked, organizing her documents into neat stacks. He thinks having board support makes him untouchable. He's even leaving paper trails. No, Richard corrected, his tone sharp. He's gotten arrogant. There's a difference. He pulled out his phone and showed them a message from Lauren earlier that morning. My assistant's been tracking his meetings with board members. He's already secured Jennifer McGrath and 3 others to back him for CEO. Marco's expression darkened. Jennifer's ambitious and inexperienced. Nathan probably dangled the COO position in front of her. Which makes this all the more urgent, Richard said, standing. I need everything prepared for tomorrow morning. Every claim substantiated, every number verified, every witness ready to testify. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of focused effort. Richard's home office became a makeshift command center, with Lauren coordinating between Heidi, Marco, and other trusted allies. By Sunday evening, they had built an airtight case against Nathan Reynolds. Monday morning dawned unexpectedly clear, the rain of the weekend giving way to bright skies. Richard arrived at Apex Enterprises an hour early, noting Nathan's Tesla already parked in its reserved spot. The so-called Golden Boy was clearly preparing his defense. The boardroom filled gradually. Walter Finch sat at the head of the table, his face unreadable as he scanned the agenda. Jennifer McGrath entered with Bradley Fletcher. The two engaged in a quiet conversation. Other board members filed in, each adding to the tension in the room. Nathan strode in 5 minutes late, his weekend tan stark under the fluorescent lights. He took his seat with the self-assurance of someone who believed the outcome was already decided, barely sparing Richard a glance. Melissa slipped in moments later, taking a seat farther down the table, her focus fixed on her tablet. Before we address succession, Walter began, his voice cutting through the murmurs. There are some pressing concerns about marketing's recent performance. Nathan rose smoothly, adjusting his tailored silk tie. I'm happy to address any concerns regarding my department's performance. As you'll see from our latest figures, actually, Richard interrupted, standing with his own presentation folder. I have some figures of my own to present. He nodded toward Lauren, who began distributing thick packets to the board members. These documents reveal a consistent pattern of fraudulent reporting, misuse of company resources, and deliberate deception. The room grew silent as board members opened the packets. Nathan's confident demeanor faltered slightly as he glanced at the contents. Page 1 highlights the reported ROI figures from marketing. Over the past 6 quarters, Richard continued, his voice calm but firm. Page 2 provides the actual numbers, verified by internal audit. Heidi Bishop stood, her laser pointer illuminating specific discrepancies on the projected slide. Marketing has been double-counting successes and masking failures. For instance, the Asia-Pacific expansion claims a 300% return, but those numbers include organic growth from operations and exaggerated market penetration figures. Bradley Fletcher, the CFO, leaned forward, his brow furrowed. These figures align with the irregularities flagged by my team last quarter. We've been trying to reconcile these discrepancies for months. Nathan's chair screeched as he pushed it back to stand. These allegations are baseless. My department's results speak for themselves. The board has seen the innovations we've introduced. Yes, let's discuss those results, Richard countered, advancing to the next section of his presentation. Marco, would you care to elaborate on the beach house? Marco Langston rose, his precise legal tone filling the room. The property Mr. Reynolds has been using for personal activities is registered as a company asset. He has expensed private trips as business expenditures, including this past weekend stay. Melissa's tablet slipped from her hands, clattering onto the table. She quickly retrieved it, her hands trembling slightly. Additionally, Marco continued, we have documented evidence of multiple inappropriate relationships with subordinates, all conducted under the guise of company business. These activities have been funded by company resources. Kirsten Pierce from HR stepped forward, having quietly entered during the presentation. My department has received formal complaints regarding Mr. Reynolds' conduct, all documented and investigated. Nathan's composed facade began to crack. This is a witch hunt, he exclaimed, his voice desperate. Jennifer, you've witnessed firsthand the innovation my department has brought. Tell them about the supply chain improvements. You mean these supply chain improvements? Richard asked, clicking to the next slide. It displayed project documents clearly bearing his signature. The improvements my operations team implemented last quarter, the same ones your department took credit for? Jennifer McGrath, who had grown increasingly pale during the presentation, cleared her throat. I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in Nathan Reynolds' leadership. Nathan spun toward her, his expression a mix of betrayal and desperation. Jennifer, we had an agreement. Based on lies, she replied firmly. I won't stake my reputation on falsified data and unethical conduct. Melissa abruptly stood. I need to clarify something. Nathan manipulated me, used our professional relationship. Actually, Richard interjected, pulling out his phone. He played an audio recording. You can't control who I spend time with. This marriage is just paper now. Nathan's taking me to his beach house. The silence that followed was deafening. Walter Finch stood, his commanding presence silencing any potential outbursts. I believe we've heard enough. Bradley, Verify these figures with internal audit immediately. Kirsten, I want a comprehensive HR review on my desk by the end of the day. Marco, begin preparing the necessary documentation for termination proceedings. Nathan Reynolds, the man who had meticulously schemed to take everything from Richard, slumped back into his chair, his carefully crafted image shattered. His flawless appearance now seemed like a cheap veneer, his tailored suit unable to shield him from the fallout. This meeting is adjourned, Walter announced. The board will reconvene this afternoon to address succession planning. Mr. Reynolds, Mrs. Calloway, please remain in your offices until HR contacts you. As the board members filed out, Richard caught Melissa's gaze. For a brief moment, he glimpsed the woman he had once loved, the partner who had shared his dreams and his grief. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who had chosen ambition over loyalty and deceit over trust. Lauren appeared at his side, efficiently gathering the presentation materials. Sir, legal needs your signature on several documents. Richard nodded, turning away from Melissa's pleading look without a word. The morning sun streamed through the boardroom's windows, illuminating the path ahead. Richard had won this battle not through revenge, but through preparation, integrity, and the loyalty of people who valued truth over ambition. The corporate world might run on paper, contracts, reports, and presentations, but it was sustained by something far more important: trust. Nathan and Melissa had forgotten that simple truth, and now they would face the consequences of their choices. As Richard walked out of the boardroom, he felt no triumph, only a quiet certainty that justice, in this case, would be served through spreadsheets and documentation rather than heated confrontations. Sometimes, he reflected, the most decisive victories were achieved not with grand gestures, but with careful attention to detail and unwavering commitment to truth. Marco caught up with him at the elevator. The termination papers will be ready within the hour. And Richard? Marco hesitated, choosing his words. That recording of Melissa? Having a home security system that captures audio could raise privacy concerns. Richard allowed himself a small smile. Except our system doesn't record audio. But they didn't know that, did they? The elevator doors closed on Marco's surprised laugh, carrying Richard toward his next challenge. The war wasn't over. There would be legal battles, PR challenges, and a company to rebuild. But for now, he had won the most critical battle, the fight for truth. In his office, Lauren was already coordinating with HR and legal, her efficiency unmatched as she managed the fallout of the morning's revelations. She handed him a fresh coffee without being asked and then paused. Sir, was it worth it? All the preparation, the waiting, building the case instead of confronting them immediately. Richard looked out at the city skyline, thinking of the weekend he'd spent alone in his house, knowing where Melissa was and what she was doing, but choosing to wait and build an irrefutable case rather than act on emotion. In chess, he said finally, the winning move isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's the quiet move, the one your opponent overlooks, that leads to checkmate. Lauren nodded, understanding the weight of his response. The board reconvenes. At 3. Shall I have Heidi prepare the operational overview you'll need as CEO? Yes, Richard replied, turning back to his desk. And Lauren? Thank you for seeing what they were planning, for gathering the evidence, for everything. Of course, sir. She paused at the door. Some people mistake kindness for weakness, loyalty for blindness. They forget the strongest foundations are built on trust, not deception. As she left, Richard opened his laptop, ready to begin the work of rebuilding what Nathan's ambition and Melissa's betrayal had tried to destroy. The morning's victory was just the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, transforming a moment of justice into lasting change. But that was tomorrow's fight. For now, he had termination papers to sign and a company to protect. The sun climbed higher in the sky, promising a day of reckoning for some and renewal for others. In the end, Richard reflected, every betrayal carried within it the seeds of its own destruction. Nathan and Melissa had planted those seeds themselves, forgetting that in the corporate world as in life, truth might be delayed, but it could never be permanently denied. The boardroom had been silent after the vote. 12 hands, raised in unison. No abstentions, no dissenting voices. Walter Finch's gavel struck the polished mahogany table with quiet finality. The board unanimously confirms Richard Calloway as Chief Executive Officer of Apex Enterprises, effective immediately. Walter's voice carried the weight of 25 years of leadership. Congratulations, Richard. The company is in your hands now. Richard stood, accepting handshakes and congratulations with measured grace. Through the glass walls, he could see Lauren organizing documents at her desk, her efficiency unaffected by the morning's events. On her screen, termination papers were already being prepared. Your first actions as CEO will set the tone, Walter murmured, lingering after the other board members had filed out. Make them count. The leather of Richard's new chair creaked as he settled behind the CEO's desk. The morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the carpet. His laptop chimed with an incoming email from Marco Langston, the subject line reading, "Termination documentation. Urgent." Lauren appeared in the doorway, her tablet in hand. "Sir, HR has the paperwork prepared for both Nathan Reynolds and Melissa Calloway. Security is on standby." She paused, then added, "Melissa is in her office, packing her personal belongings. Nathan hasn't left the conference room." "Have security escort Nathan out first," Richard instructed, his pen hovering over the termination papers. "I'll handle Melissa's departure personally." The scratch of his pen across paper echoed in the quiet office. Two signatures, ending not just careers but a marriage and a betrayal. Through his window, Richard watched as security approached the conference room where Nathan sat, head in hands, his weekend tan now pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. Nathan's exit from the building was quiet. No dramatic outbursts, no scenes, just a defeated man clutching a cardboard box of personal items, his once pristine Italian shoes scuffing against the marble floors he would never tread again. Melissa's departure was different. Richard found her in her office, the designer weekend bag perched on her desk as she carefully emptied drawers into it. The same bag she had packed for her weekend with Nathan now held the remnants of her career. She looked up as he entered, her fingers absently tracing the bag's leather strap. "I suppose there's no point in offering explanations now." "No," Richard replied, placing the termination notice on her desk. "The marriage may be paper, but so is your termination notice. Both tell their own stories." Security waited discreetly by the elevator as Melissa walked out, her heels clicking one last time on the floors of Apex Enterprises. She didn't look back. The following weeks brought a wave of change. Lauren sat across from Richard in what had been Nathan's office, now stripped of its gaudy modern art and restored to a space of practical elegance. "The board approved all your restructuring proposals," she reported, her new title of Director of Operations fitting naturally. "Heidi Bishop's promotion to EVP is official as of this morning." Richard nodded, scrolling through the updated organizational charts on his tablet. "And marketing?" "Morgan Galvin arrives from the West Coast office next week. Her preliminary audit has already revealed some interesting patterns," Lauren replied, pulling up an email. "She's found evidence that Nathan tried similar schemes at his previous companies. Not as bold, but the pattern was there." Through the glass walls of the marketing department, Richard observed the renewed energy. Gone were the inflated egos and falsified numbers of Nathan's tenure, replaced by a culture of accountability and transparency under Heidi's firm leadership. Morgan Galvin quickly made her mark. The former West Coast marketing director approached her. New role with precision, her audit uncovering not just Nathan's actions, but systemic issues that had lingered. "Nathan built his career on manipulation," Morgan explained during a late-night strategy session, her laser pointer tracing anomalies in historical data. "He'd start small, taking credit for others' work, tweaking numbers just enough to draw attention. By the time he made his bigger moves, people had already bought into his narrative." Heidi nodded, her new EVP nameplate gleaming under the conference room lights. Classic fraudster playbook. Small lies build trust for larger deceptions. We've seen the same patterns across his expense reports and project claims. As weeks turned into months, seasons shifted. Spring faded into summer, then autumn, and Apex Enterprises thrived under its new leadership. The company's stock price rose steadily, with a 40% growth under Richard's first 6 months validating every decision and change. One crisp October morning, Lauren entered his office with a stack of documents and a knowing look. "The divorce papers arrived," she said, placing them on his desk alongside another file. "Property records for a familiar beach house." "The board approved the acquisition," she confirmed, though Richard already anticipated the answer. "Unanimously. It's been undervalued since Nathan's scandal. Once renovated, it'll make an excellent corporate retreat. A symbol of transformation, you might say." Richard signed the divorce papers with the same pen he had used for the termination notices months prior. The symbolism was not lost on him. Endings and beginnings, captured in ink and legal formality. His phone buzzed with a news alert, and the headline caught his eye. "Former marketing executive indicted for corporate fraud." Nathan's past had finally caught up with him. Buried in the article was a familiar name, Melissa Calloway, listed as a key witness for the prosecution. "Should we issue a statement?" Lauren asked from the doorway, anticipating his next move. Richard shook his head, turning to the expansive view from the CEO's office. The perspective was wider, clearer, and full of new opportunities. "No need," he said. "We've moved on to bigger things." His gaze settled on the beach house report. The property that had once hosted Betrayal would soon serve a greater purpose, with renovation plans already underway. The irony wasn't lost on Richard as he transformed a symbol of betrayal into a space for corporate renewal. The afternoon sun bathed the city in warm hues of amber and gold. From the outer office, he could hear Heidi and Morgan discussing next quarter's projections, their confident voices a testament to the company's new direction. On Lauren's desk sat a small plaque, Employee of the Year, earned through loyalty and competence rather than manipulation. "Success," Richard mused, running his fingers over the embossed nameplate on his desk, "is the best revenge." The thought lingered as he reviewed acquisition proposals, each decision propelling Apex Enterprises further away from the shadows of deceit into a future defined by transparency and trust. In the end, Nathan and Melissa's betrayal had given him something unexpected, not just a victory, but a vision. The company they had tried to exploit now stood stronger, its culture transformed, and its future secure. Their deception had driven a necessary evolution, turning crisis into opportunity. As autumn sunshine gave way to dusk, Richard's calendar reflected a relentless pace, strategy sessions, investor presentations, and planning for the next quarter's growth. The rhythm of corporate life continued, but it now moved to a different beat. Lauren entered one final time that day, placing a report on his desk. "Sir, the renovation plans for the beach house are ready for review. The architects have some innovative ideas for the space." Richard smiled, recognizing the symmetry of the moment. The property that once harbored secrets and lies would now foster open dialogue and honest collaboration. Sometimes, he reflected, the best response to betrayal wasn't revenge, but renewal. As night settled over the city, lights began to twinkle in skyscrapers, each one a symbol of resilience and ambition. In one corner office, a CEO reviewed the papers that would shape his company's future. Each decision took Apex Enterprises further from the shadows of the past. The view from the top had changed Richard as much as he had changed the company, not hardening him against trust, but teaching him to build it on stronger foundations. The ghosts of betrayal had faded, replaced by the tangible reality of success. In the end, that was the truest victory, not merely surviving deception, but using it as a catalyst for transformation. Apex Enterprises stood taller now, its foundation fortified by weathering the storm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new decisions. But tonight, high above the city, Richard allowed himself a moment to appreciate the view. Success, he had learned, wasn't just about winning, it was about building something worth fighting for. The night deepened, but the lights in the CEO's office continued to glow. There was work to do, a future to build, and a legacy to create. The best revenge, after all, wasn't just success. It was success that transformed betrayal into opportunity, crisis into growth, and endings into new beginnings. In that transformation lay the true measure of victory. 5 years later, a Manhattan courtroom buzzed with whispers as Nathan Reynolds, once the golden boy of corporate marketing, stood for sentencing. The designer suits were gone, replaced by off-the-rack clearance wear, and his once meticulous appearance was marred by streaks of premature gray. 5 years of legal battles had stripped him of more than his fortune. They had eroded the confidence that had been his hallmark. Judge Eleanor Martinez adjusted her glasses, scanning the verdict one final time. "Mr. Reynolds," she began, her voice firm, "you have been found guilty of multiple counts of corporate fraud, embezzlement, and financial misrepresentation spanning 3 companies over 8 years. Your actions destroyed careers, betrayed trust, and undermined the foundations of corporate governance." In the gallery, Melissa Calloway sat stiffly, her testimony as a state's witness instrumental in sealing Nathan's fate. The years had not been kind to her either. Blacklisted from major corporations after the Apex Enterprises scandal, she had resorted to entry-level marketing roles, her prestigious career reduced to managing social media accounts for small businesses. "The court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison," Judge Martinez continued, "with an additional 5 years of supervised release. You are also ordered to pay $4.2 million in restitution to affected companies and shareholders." Nathan's shoulders slumped as bailiffs approached, his fall from grace complete. His eyes found Melissa in the gallery, but she quickly looked away, gathering her budget blazer and discount handbag, a stark contrast to the designer pieces she once flaunted. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Heidi Bishop, now the CEO of Apex Enterprises. At 52, she carried the role with the same precision and integrity that had defined her as EVP. "Apex Enterprises has no comment on today's sentencing," she said firmly. "Our focus remains on our expansion into Asian markets and the upcoming Tech Innovation Summit. However, we believe justice has been served." Back at Apex's headquarters, now occupying 3 towers in Manhattan's financial district, Richard Calloway reviewed quarterly projections with his executive team. At 48, he had transformed from a betrayed executive into a corporate legend, renowned for turning the company's darkest chapter into its greatest triumph. "Morgan, walk us through marketing's numbers," he said, nodding to Morgan Galvin, whose overhaul of the department had become a Harvard Business School case study in corporate transformation. Morgan, now the executive vice president of global marketing, activated a holographic display. Her reputation for ruthless transparency had made her both respected and feared across the industry. "We're seeing 300% growth in emerging markets. Real growth, not the smoke and mirrors of the old regime. Every figure has been triple verified by internal audit." Lauren Carson, now the chief operating officer, smiled at the reference. Her rise through Apex's ranks had inspired a mentorship program for administrative staff, turning support roles into a pipeline for leadership. "Speaking of transparency," Lauren said, "the Corporate Integrity Institute wants you to keynote their annual conference, Richard. Apparently, our governance model is now the industry standard." The afternoon sun streamed through the executive floor's windows, casting light on a wall lined with awards. Most Ethical Corporation, Innovation in Corporate Governance, Leadership Excellence. Each plaque marked another milestone in Apex's journey from scandal to industry exemplar. "Seen this?" Lauren asked, sliding her tablet across the table. It displayed a business news article about Melissa's latest venture, a modest marketing consultancy operating out of a strip mall in New Jersey. The comment section was filled with references to the Apex scandal, ensuring her past shadowed every professional move. "She applied for a position at Thompson Industries last month," Morgan added. "They rejected her immediately. Some bells can't be unrung." Richard waved away the tablet. "The past is the past. Let's focus on more pressing matters." He pulled up an image of the corporate retreat center, the renovated beach house where his marriage had unraveled. "The Leadership Academy's first class graduates next week," he said. 20 promising managers, trained to carry our values into new ventures." The beach house's transformation mirrored Apex itself, stripped of its tainted history and rebuilt into something meaningful. Its modern conference rooms and training facilities had hosted hundreds of rising executives, each learning the cost of ethical lapses through the property's own story. Later that evening, in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, Richard reviewed an email from Walter Finch, now enjoying retirement in the Berkshires. The former CEO still served as an advisor, his wisdom instrumental. During Apex's transformation, saw the news about Nathan's sentencing, Walter wrote. It reminds me of something I learned over 40 years in business. Success built on deception is just failure in disguise. You've turned their betrayal into a legacy of integrity. That's real success. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Catherine Lee, his wife of 3 years, entered with 2 glasses of wine. As the head of the city's largest charitable foundation, she understood power, but wielded it with compassion instead of ambition. Rough day? She asked, noticing the news articles on his screen. Just old ghosts being laid to rest, Richard replied, taking a glass. Nathan's sentencing was today. 8 years. Catherine settled beside him, her presence calming. They'd met at a corporate ethics panel, her foundation's transparency initiatives aligning with Apex's reform values. Their courtship had been deliberate, built on shared principles rather than fleeting passion. I saw Melissa last week, Catherine mentioned, her tone neutral. At that small business convention in Newark. She's trying again. 5th attempt, I think. Richard nodded, unsurprised. Consequences have a way of compounding. Nathan's conviction will make her reinvention even harder. No major corporation will risk hiring someone connected to that level of scandal. His phone chimed with a message from Marco Langston, still Apex's chief counsel. The legal team had just won another award for corporate compliance, with their transparency protocols becoming the gold standard for multinationals. Remember that junior executive who tried Nathan's old tricks last month? Marco's message read, just submitted his resignation. Apparently, our ethics training videos, featuring a certain beach house, made quite an impression. Richard smiled, recalling the program's centerpiece, a case study on Nathan and Melissa's downfall, taught in the very rooms where they had plotted their betrayal. Poetic justice, he thought, had a way of completing the circle. Beyond his window, the city lights sparkled, a vastly different view from the one he had during those dark days 5 years ago. Apex Enterprises had surpassed even Richard Calloway's greatest ambitions, its market cap now dwarfing anything he'd imagined. More importantly, it stood as a testament to resilience, the power of turning betrayal into transformation. His tablet chimed with a news alert. Nathan Reynolds, hands cuffed, being led to prison transport. The comment section filled with industry peers and former colleagues sharing their own stories of his deceit. 8 years in prison would give Nathan ample time to reflect on the true cost of betrayal. Melissa's downfall had been slower, a gradual slide into professional irrelevance. Her testimony against Nathan had spared her legal consequences, but left her with a different kind of sentence. In an industry built on trust and reputation, Melissa had become a cautionary tale, her name forever tied to scandal and betrayal. The Leadership Academy board approved your proposal, Catherine said, glancing at her own emails. They want to expand the ethics program to satellite campuses. There's already a waiting list for the corporate governance workshops. The irony wasn't lost on Richard. The very property where Nathan had sought to celebrate his triumph had become a beacon of corporate integrity. Each year, hundreds of executives walked its halls, learning firsthand how unchecked ambition could destroy careers, marriages, and legacies. A final email arrived from Lauren. Thought you'd want to know. Nathan's old marketing team from his previous company reached out. They're asking to enroll in our compliance training. Looks like his conviction sparked some soul-searching. Richard allowed himself a small smile. Success, he reflected, wasn't just about winning. It was about winning in a way that redefined the game itself. Nathan and Melissa had pursued victory through deception, only to become examples of its futility. Their betrayal had ignited a movement toward corporate transparency that extended far beyond Apex's walls. The night deepened over Manhattan, the skyline glowing as a testament to ambition fulfilled and corrupted. Somewhere in the glittering city, Melissa was likely planning another attempt at reinvention, and Nathan was facing his first night in prison. Across the industry, countless others were confronting their own choices between integrity and expedience. But here, in the aftermath of Betrayal, Richard had built something enduring, not just a corporate empire, but a legacy of transformation. Apex had risen from scandal to become a symbol that success and integrity were not only compatible, but inseparable. Catherine raised her glass in a quiet toast. To consequences. To choices, Richard amended, thinking of the decisions that had brought them to this moment. Nathan's choice to deceive, Melissa's choice to betray, and his own choice to rebuild rather than seek revenge. In the end, it wasn't just success that had proven the best revenge. It was success that turned betrayal's bitter lessons into something noble, something lasting, something true. The price of betrayal had been steep, but its dividends measured. In wisdom and integrity would yield returns for generations. Outside the window, Manhattan's lights sparkled against the night sky, each one representing a story of ambition, choice, triumph, and consequence. But in Richard's story, he had written an ending that transcended revenge. He had built a legacy, and that, more than any revenge, was the sweetest victory of all.